Hey guys, my name's Lonnie. I'm a real alcoholic. So we're on chapter one, Bill's story. Bill Wilson, a co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the first part I highlighted on this story was Bill felt he was a part of life at last. And in the midst of that, he discovered liquor. And my liquor consumption at an early age was exactly that, man. When I took that when I took those drinks, when I took those shots, I felt that it was that peace and that comfort. I could entertain my friends. I could enjoy my time with them. As I grew older, I just felt like I had arrived. I had things going for me. Life was looking up. So so to be a part of life at last, I think was something that we all looked for. Eventually, of course, we isolated, and most of us didn't want to have anything to do with anybody. But this being a part of life was a longing inside of me that I never could quite get without the alcohol or the drug. Now, on page two, Bill talks about the potential alcoholic that I was. And what he's going to show us in the next couple pages is his progression, okay, of his drinking. He drank before he went to the war. He went to the war. He came out at 22 years old. He was in college. He was in law school. And looking back, when he was looking back on his life, he saw that at that time in college, that he was a potential alcoholic and he almost failed his law courses because of his drinking. We get to page three. He had dropped out of law school. He was doing some stuff on the stock markets, man. The money was coming in. He's got a wife now. And it says, my drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. So, from his time in law school, over the course of the next few years, all of a sudden now we see that progression to where he's drinking almost every day and every night. And in the mornings at the bottom there, he started to feel a little jittery in the mornings. All hell broke loose on Wall Street in 1929. And he went stay with a friend. But at the bottom it says he was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. So we see this progression happening that, the money and the applause and the social networking and the, man, the lifestyle he was living came to an end. And he tried to go live with a friend and do some manual labor just so him and his wife could get by, which was pretty humbling from where he had come from. But he had reached a point where he couldn't. He just could not do any real employment. He couldn't stay sober. And he crossed this invisible line here on page five, right? We talk about this real alcoholic a lot. You will read that later in the book, but on page five, he says, liquor ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. And for me, looking back on my life, man, I can't exactly pinpoint the day or the years that happened, but somehow this progression that we have and is guaranteed for the alcoholic who continues to drink is we will progress to where it ceased to be a luxury and it becomes a necessity. It becomes a necessity for several reasons. Number one, physically, we become physically dependent. We physically, our bodies will shut down, go into DTs. Physically, we become dependent on the alcohol, and mentally, we're in such turmoil um, that that's the only way we can find peace is by drinking. I mean, we read that with all this stuff that happened to Bill and the Great Depression and all of that, He wasn't going to jump, man. He wasn't going to kill himself, but he was going to drink. And a lot of us were like that, guys, man. A lot of us reached that point where, no, I might not want to take my own life yet, but I will drink because that's where I found peace and comfort. That's what enabled me to wake up and somehow face life. As sick as it was, as much damage as I was doing to myself, I was still in this delusion that as long as the alcohol made me feel good, I could handle whatever was going on around me. So we go ahead and read that he had some periods of sobriety after that, right? And then he started binge drinking. He would stay sober for a little while, then he would get hammered, man. He would stay sober, then he would get hammered. Um, he would get cocky, right? He would stay sober and like, man, I don't even want it no more. I can laugh at the gin mills. I can walk by the bar rooms and I'm not even tempted. And then all of a sudden one day he just walks into a cafe to make a telephone call. Next thing you know, he's drunk as a skunk. And and I repeated that too, man. How many times was I sober? I had brief moments of sobriety, and then before you know it, there's that calling of that one drink. Suddenly the thought crossed my mind that I can have one drink, maybe two. Next thing you know, I'm closing the bar down at 2 o'clock in the morning. Next thing you know, I'm drinking all weekend. Next thing you know, I'm missing in action for a week or two. And it just got ridiculous. And so I too went back and forth with this when I reached that stage of alcoholism where it became a necessity, mentally and physically. There was no stopping. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how confident I got, this mental obsession always led me back to the bottle. Once I put it in my system, I was off and running again. So on page 7, the doctor's trying to help Bill out, gave him some sedatives, and the next morning they found Bill. He's drinking the gin and the sedatives, right? So we got us a real good alcoholic and drug addict on our hands here. That combination soon landed him on the rocks, and people feared for his sanity. And so did I. In my last stages of drinking, that's where I was at also. I kind of feared for my own sanity. So he goes to this hospital, man, and he meets Dr. Silkworth, the doctor's opinion, the doctor who wrote the doctor's opinion. And he learned that he was seriously ill, both in the bodily and the mental sense. And so he got some good cognitive behavior therapy or whatever therapy we're given in the treatment centers. So he understood himself now, man, and he left there. And he was in high hopes. Well, this is it. I understand the medical condition. I have a medical condition called alcoholism. He understood that. I can never safely use alcohol again. I understand that. He understood all that, man. The doctor had taught it to him. Um, but he would always continue to drink, stay sober a little while, reach for the next drink. A habitual relapser. Page 8. Now, here, Bill clearly admits, he says, alcohol was my master. He clearly admits he had met his match. He had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was his master. And this first step of knowing I'm powerless and my life is unmanageable, I knew that long before I got to the treatment center this last time. I knew it long before I got to detox the last time. Um, it was this idea that I know I cannot drink, but I knew I could not stay sober either. And it was depressing. It was miserable. There was a lot of despair. Um, so just the fact of us having this knowledge from our doctors, our psychiatrists, our psychologists, other members of Alcoholics Anonymous, just by us gaining this knowledge of we're alcoholic, it's a big step but it did not cure Bill's alcoholism. It did not help him recover. It was not based on self-knowledge. And so he stepped from that hospital, and he stayed sober for a little while. He said fear sobered me a bit. A lot of us stayed sober on fear. Oh no, 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 I can't drink. Oh no, 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 I can't drink. I'm gonna get in trouble if I drink. I'm gonna hurt myself if I drink. No, 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 I can't drink. Right? And then eventually the day comes when we'll break down and we'll try that first drink again. So his friend comes to see him. Okay, his old school friend called him and he wants to come see him. Bill knows this guy's a drunk. He drank with him. That was his partying buddy. And this guy was sober 2 months, man. I want to point that out too. Here you got somebody with 2 months sobriety going 12 steps somebody else. And so when his friend got there, he noticed something different about his friend, and his friend simply said, "I've got religion." Now, Bill must have been pretty desperate to put up with this, but he says, "Oh man," he said, "I'm gonna let this guy talk about Jesus, and I'm gonna keep drinking." And he actually offered the guy a drink, and the guy said no. So Bill kept drinking, and this guy just simply 12 step Bill W. and told him of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. Here's a big part: practical program of action. This is not a program of spiritual thinking. It's not a program of spiritual praying, spiritual meditating, spiritual knowledge. This is a practical program of action. This idea that we have, this process that we have, puts us into action so that we can actually do some things that help us to recover from alcoholism. We can't just know about it and think our way out of it. We have to actually do some things. And so the guy is talking to Bill, and Bill's contemplating all this God talk that the guy is talking about, and Bill still had some prejudice, man. When anybody mentioned a God that was personal to Bill, his mind would snap shut. Um, he could go for the spirit of the universe right here. He could go for some other conceptions. He always believed he was agnostic. He believed there was something out there. But when you come talking to Bill about Jesus or some kind of God that's personal to him, no, he wasn't buying it. And he tells us his beliefs here, that like his belief in Christ. He says, "This is probably a good dude. I'm gonna do those parts that are easy, right? And not too hard. That other stuff, I'm just gonna let it go." He gives his opinion on the devil, right? But what happens is he sees this guy across the table who he knows is a full blown drunk. And there he is, recovered. And there's something that's different. There's something that changed in this man. His skin is different. His eyes are different. He's carrying himself different. And so Bill says, that floored me, man. Obviously, this guy is no smarter than me. He has no more willpower than me. He's not, there's nothing about this man that's any different than me, except he's talking about this spiritual experience he had. So Bill says that floored me. It begins to look as though religious people were right after all. And here was this miracle sitting across the table from him. So he's still thinking, okay, I'm still not buying this Jesus stuff, man. I don't know about all that. So Bill says, look, I can go for conceptions, creative, intelligent, universal mind, or spirit of nature. He could go for these things. And so Ebby tells him, his friend tells him, he says, that's fine. Why don't you choose your own conception of God? And that's all that was needed. That's all that was needed for his step two, was a power to believe in, a willingness to believe in a power greater than himself. Nothing more was required to make a beginning. He saw that growth could start at that point. And so that's what he did. He started thinking about this conception, man. Could I do this with this simple conception I have of a universal spirit, a universal mind, a spirit of nature, creative intelligence. Yeah, that could be possible. And so, man, Bill bought it. He was like, yeah, I'll go through with this deal. And so they get him to the hospital one more time because Bill's got a bad habit of going into DTs. So they get him to the hospital one more time. And in that hospital, he was in the hospital 9 days, I think it was. And during that time, his brain started clearing up after a few days, right? The alcohol, for the most part, will leave our system. And so Bill started doing some steps, man. And I humbly offered myself to God. That was Bill's third step. When he says, I ruthlessly face my sins, we call them sins, character defects. You can call them shortcomings. It really doesn't make a crap what you call them. But he faced his shortcomings, and he faced his sins, and he became willing to have his newfound friend take them away root and branch. Now, his newfound friend after his third step, that's not his friend Ebby, right? Ebby's not going to take away these character defects. His newfound friend was his conception in this higher power. And he hadn't had a drink since then. So Ebby's visiting him in the hospital, and they did steps 4 and 5 together. They made a list of people and became willing to make amends to him. They did 8 and 9, right? Step 10, he was to test his thinking by the new God consciousness within. All right, he's to do a step 10. He's to do his step 11. So they're doing the steps while he's in the hospital, and he's going through this stuff with Ebby, and Ebby's explaining to him, this is what we do. This is how we did it. And so my friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. Now, that very same thing that Bill was resisting over here, when you talked of a God that was personal to him, he was resisting it. And I resisted that too. I did not know that we could have a personal relationship with a living God. I did not know we could have a personal relationship with the creative intelligence of this universe, with the spirit of this universe. This conscious contact we talk about, it's not a theory, it's not an idea, it's a reality. Myself and almost everybody I know that's recovered from alcoholism has a new relationship with our Creator. So Bill's conception here, he turns all things over into the Father of Light. So once he accepted these, right, they were revolutionary and they were drastic proposals, these 12 steps. But once he fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by peace and serenity that I had never known. And remember, guys, as alcoholics, we look for peace and serenity. We want ease and comfort. That's what the bottle gave us. That's what all these other abnormal behaviors gave us, was ease and comfort. And whenever Bill accepted these proposals and was willing to go through with them, there was a sense of peace and serenity that he had never known. And I too have felt that. So at the bottom, so he's going through this process, and he feels this peace, he feels this serenity, he gets this connection with a higher power. And his friend emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly, it was imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. That's our 12th step. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And we know in Bill's story that that's what he did, man. He went out and he started trying to help others. But I love the way it says, for if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life. It didn't tell me that my spiritual life was going to be enlarged by how many times I went to church a week. It did not tell me that I had to meditate for an hour in lotus position and do fourfold breathing. No, it tells me that my spiritual life is going to be perfected and enlarged through work and self sacrifice for others. That's how it's going to be enlarged. It's a program of action, not a program of thinking. And so Bill did that, and he did. He got in a bind at a hotel at a place he was staying for business, and he almost went to the bar. He got on the phone. He called somebody to contact him with a suffering alcoholic, and he went and talked to this suffering alcoholic, and that turned out to be our other co-founder, Dr. Bob. So, so it took Bill a while, man. He says, I was not too well. He was plagued by waves of self pity and resentment, but he found that work with an alcoholic always saves the day. Always saves the day. Um, a lot of us will wrestle with some depressions, will wrestle with some self pity, with some remorse over some things we've done. But those things will fluctuate, man. We eventually learn to either we learn how to forgive those that hurt us. We learn how to accept life on life's terms. There's a lot of things that we learn in this relationship with our higher power that enables us to match these down times, these hard times, with some peace and some serenity. And I don't have to run to the bottle. So these waves of self-pity and resentment that Bill experienced after going through these steps, we can almost expect it. Everything's not, I love the saying in AA, man, it's not all lollipops and unicorn farts, man. You know, life is real, but we learn to live with it, and we learn to find some peace and some comfort where we never could find it before. And so Bill goes on to tell us about the growth of the AA meetings and his successes with working with other people. So, so in Bill's story, I hope we realize the progression of this disease. Okay, where it started out, he was a potential alcoholic doing some hard drinking, where it ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. The multiple times that this man tried to quit on his own, he tried to quit with the help of doctors in the hospitals and psychologists, and he never could stay stopped until he had this spiritual experience that these 12 steps offer. And we'll get into that spiritual experience more. Sometimes people have it. It's profound. It happens in a day or two or a week. Some people grow into it more slowly. We have no rule on such matters. We don't control God and how God treats His children. That's His relationship with you. You know, His relationship with me is slightly a bit different. So God will determine, and the individual will determine the amount of spiritual growth and the timing of it. But there's something that's guaranteed in our program, that if we go through these steps and practice these principles, these steps that they lined out for us, if we practice those on a daily basis, we too will have this spiritual experience, and we too can recover from chronic alcoholism. So, great, good deal, guys. I want to say, anybody have a question? No, I want to thank you guys for showing up and for going through this again. I'm not even halfway through yet, and I already have two people that are reviewing this, that we went through the steps a while back. So I'm very excited about that. And it's also good for me, guys. Every time I go through this book, whether it's with a group of people at an AA meeting, whether it's one-on-one with individuals, whether it's one-on-one with a sponsor, I always manage to get closer with God, and to find a little bit more peace and comfort. Take out some insurance against the next drink. All right. Thank y'all, and we'll see you next time. Take it easy.